Hello and welcome back once again to our How to Paint series. We are continuing on with our Dark Angels Plasma Hellblasters. We have 5 of them to do, so we're going to go ahead and jump right back into it. Once again, continuing on, if I can show it properly, with our Caliban Green. And as always, we'll make sure that our brush is properly watered down and our paint is very much thinned. Now, we did start doing the kind of base coat on our Sergeant last time, so we're just going to finish that up, and then we'll move on to kind of some of the other guys we have, and hopefully we'll be kind of quick enough we can start doing a little bit more of the kind of detail work. At least, start that in this episode as well. And, of course, now that we have our paint the kind of consistency that we want, we are going to just continue on doing a kind of nice second layer, which should give us the coverage we need. We might have to do a little bit more overlap in some areas, just kind of depending on how lucky we are with managing to get everything here. But I think 2 layers is generally kind of enough for the majority of it. Maybe the kind of bottom of the feet there look like I missed a little bit with the primer, so that might be kind of an issue. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I do want to apologize a little bit if my voice is kind of more raspy than it usually is. I just came off a 12-hour shift working hospital security, so it gets a little bit rowdy there. Thankfully nothing too crazy happened overnight though, so could be much worse. The guys on the shift before me had a little bit of a wild time though. Guy busted out of a 5th floor window and decided he was going to jump onto the awning one or 2 floor below, and ended up getting tased a few times. Just normal everyday stuff in that kind of line of work. But thankfully I didn't get to deal with any of that craziness. I was kind of thinking a little bit on my drive home today about kind of video projects that I could do, just to kind of spice things up. And I'm a little bit reluctant to throw this out there in case somebody swipes it. But honestly, if it's something you want to do, I don't really mind. As I try to keep the camera focused here on what I'm actually doing. But I was thinking about doing a Bob Ross style painting on a rhino or a titan shoulder or something. Just a kind of bigger piece where we have more canvas area. But I think something like that would be kind of cool. I think I'd do it with ultramarines or something where our background is kind of going to be a natural kind of blue, because that's the basis of every Bob Ross painting, right? He always starts with the sky. It's always blue. I think that'd be kind of a fun little thing to do. It wouldn't really make sense kind of thematically, having a really nice kind of pretty landscape, some happy little trees and a little cabin or 2. But I think it'd still be fun to do overall. So maybe that's kind of something that we can look forward to in the future. In kind of the more immediate future, there's definitely some more stuff I want to pick up. I do want to pick up the Tau Combat Patrol at some point. I know the meme is that Tau are bad, haha, funny. And I'm all about the memes in 40K. It's my favorite part. But also, I was actually looking at the Combat Patrol for the first time and kind of looking at some Tau models recently. And I've never really, given them a second thought prior to, recently. And man, I gotta say, especially the battle suits and stuff, they have some really cool models. Even your standard Tau fire teams and stuff, they just look really nice. And I think doing some off-white kind of coloring, I think we could get some really nice looking stuff. So I think that's kind of next up, at least in terms of my purchases. In terms of just what we're going to be recording, I do have a ton more intercessors to paint up. And I think to kind of break up the monotony of doing Dark Angels, as much as I love them, and I do have the remainder of the Dark Angels Combat Patrol to do, I think I might do a squad of intercessors on maybe like Ultramarines, and then I still have another squad after that. I think we could do maybe like Blood Angels or Space Wolves, just to kind of keep things a little bit fresh, get some more tutorials out. So I'm kind of thinking that's what I'm going to be leaning towards. If you guys have any, once again, I just like to shout this out. Leaving comments of what kind of stuff you want to see helps out a lot. If you have any ideas about like what you specifically want to see models wise, or maybe like tutorial wise, how to paint like a certain way, or using certain paints, feel free to leave a comment. And as always, I do want to shout out my Patreon. It helps me kind of do more videos more often, especially getting more models. Warhammer is very expensive, and anyone who is in this hobby knows that. But yeah, if that's something that kind of sounds nice to you, if you want to support the channel, that is a great way to do it. Otherwise, I do appreciate anybody who subscribes, comments, or otherwise just likes the videos. All of it helps me out a ton, and even just watching, if you don't do any of that, just watching my content really helps. Not only give me a little bit of feedback and kind of moral support, seeing the views come in, but also kind of tells me, what kind of direction to kind of push the channel in, what kind of stuff you guys want to see. And, all that is good for growth, personal development and all that. So yeah, definitely. If you have any suggestions or whatever, comments, feel free to leave them. I really appreciate, kind of interacting with you guys. Another thing I was kind of thinking about on the drive home, so I have like a little bit of a drive. Do like 40 minutes, from work to home. Kind of gives me a good little bit of time to listen to audiobooks or podcasts or whatever. But sometimes I just like to think, especially about like 40K stuff, and especially like having this channel just makes me think about like things I want to talk about. Reading the Horus Heresy, especially, really makes you sit there and think. Like, a lot of it's headcanon, right? A lot of it's kind of, purposefully not explained or left kind of obscure. But something that I like to think about a lot is kind of the Emperor and like his mindset throughout the entirety of 40K, and everything prior to 40K, like the heresy itself, and of course the Age of Strife, Age of Darkness, all that. And something that you really need to kind of think about, I feel like, if you're at all interested in the Imperium or even the history of the galaxy, it is like the Emperor himself, right? And something I really like to think about in regards to that is kind of his grand plan, because he's I think technically he's like able to see the future, right? That's something he's allowed to do. I know like the Eldar call them Farseers. I don't know what like the human equivalent of that is, besides like a psyker. But so it's kind of a cop out to just be like, well, the events of the heresy were like pre-seen by the Emperor, right? But that's kind of the only explanation. Like he's considered to be, I think, like the best person at seeing the future. Like he's the strongest one. He's at least like the strongest psyker. Besides like Malkador and Magnus and whatnot. But it then begs the question, right? Where it's like, okay, the Emperor can see the future. Number one, how far does that go? Can he see like a year from now? Can he see 40,000 years from now? Like, did he know he was going to end up on the throne? And then number two, if he could see the future, and especially if he was able to see, where the Imperium was going to end up, why did he let the heresy happen in the first place? Like, I'm sure he knew Horus was going to fall to chaos, right? Like, that's a pretty big event that I feel like is very obvious if you're looking at the future. Like, I feel like that's just a really big thing. So I knew or you think like he knew that was going to be a thing. But why did he let that happen? And a lot of it's like, well, it's just story writing, and of course, none of these characters are real, blah blah blah. Uh, but then it leads to the perspective of like, well, it's kind of bad story writing, right? If you kind of don't look at it from that angle, um, and if you don't look at it like in a realistic sense, because if right, the emperor was a real person, and the emperor being a real person was able to see the future, he realistically would be able to, stop the heresy from happening. Right? Like, I'm not crazy thinking that. But there's just nothing to kind of indicate that that was the case. He didn't take the nails out of Engron, and I'm sure there's reasoning behind that. Again, I haven't like read all of the books. I don't know all of the lore. Um, he let Prospero get burned to the ground, and it's like, okay, well, did he know that was going to happen? Is all of this like his grand plan? That's kind of where I fall into it. I'm in like the boat where I think that the emperor kind of knew that he was gonna lose half the Imperium, and I feel like a big part of that, and it's a big reason why he went like so anti theology, is because he knew that he would end up being a corpse emperor at some point, and I feel like the end goal is for him to be the next warp god, not necessarily a chaos god like the four others, but in a sense like he is, right, like in name literally, he is the god emperor, and a big part of that is all the imperial belief and whatnot that give him a lot of his powers. So it's like, well, is that is that the grand plan? Is that the big scheme? And I know a lot of people kind of argue it, and they're like, well, that's just kind of what ended up happening. It wasn't the intended purpose or whatever. And I really got to argue that point because otherwise it just makes the emperor the dumbest man alive. And I just feel like that's very out of character. But that's the nice thing about 40K. All of it is so obscure you can kind of believe what you want. It just doesn't make sense to me to believe anything else, though. So, yeah, that's my little mini rant for the day. I am, speaking of Prospero burning, I am reading the Space Wolf Horus Heresy novel, the first one. It's like one book after, or rather 2 books after, maybe, the Thousand Suns novel, where, of course, Prospero gets burned to the ground from the Thousand Suns point of view. So it'll be nice to see it from the other angle. But man, I think I've talked about it before, and you know what? I'll talk about it again. The final scene in I think it's All Is Dust is the first Thousand Suns novel in the Heresy series. Like the chapter long WWE style fight that Magnus and Lehman Russ have is, I think, some of the best writing in the entirety of the Black Library. The book itself is not. It is well written, but man, it drags on and on for a good number of chapters. It's a very long book. I feel like they could have skipped a good half of it, and it still would have made for a good story. But yeah, those final few chapters where Prospero's being attacked is so well written, and it really just drags you into the middle of it. Like you can really just imagine all of it. I really recommend it for anyone who's remotely interested in 40K. Which, if you're watching this video, I'm going to assume you are. But yeah, definitely check it out. I also want to mention once again, Humble Bundle. If you're watching this video the day it comes out or anytime close to that, there is I think it's like a 25 book bundle that they have. It's all Space Marine stuff. Some of it looks like it's much older, but it's all Space Marines, it's all 40K stuff, and it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $25 for the whole thing, all books, all the books in that pack, and that's kind of a steal. Normally, the ebooks that I get from Amazon are like, I don't know, $12 a piece. So you're saving a ton of money there. Definitely check it out if you're interested in that. And as we kind of finish up this guy here, our paint was a little bit thick with these last like 2 or 3 guys, but I think it's still okay. It doesn't look like it's really that bad. We still do have to do a little bit of relayering on some of these parts, so maybe not. But it does mean we're going to be able to get into some of the little details today. Nothing too crazy. I'm going to have to switch to a smaller brush, I think. If I have one on my desk. Oh, maybe I don't. Oh, no. Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Just kidding. But we are going to switch out our paints here. Of course, make sure our brush is nice and clean before we do any of that. And our next paint we're going to be using is our classic Balthazar Gold, I believe it's called. I'll have to check the paint pot here in a second. Yes, if I can turn it around. Balthazar Gold. Absolute great color for Dark Angels. All the little insignias and tiny details that you get to do. I think it works great. If you want something a little bit more yellow or more like traditional gold-ish. The Retributor armor is another great color for that. And actually, I do have another brush. The one I picked up was way too small. This one, however, I think might work for us. It's not, perfect size if we can focus it there, but it'll work. And as always, I'll make sure our paint is somewhat thinned, especially with these metallics. They do tend to go on a little bit thicker. So you want to be a little bit careful about that. And we're going to just start with our Sergeant here. And using kind of the back of our brush, that little like curve, or even the side of it, we're just going to try to get this skull real quickly. Just very lightly kind of pressing on there. And come at it from a few angles, that way you get full coverage. And that's fine. I got a little bit extra on the side there, but we'll clean that up later. Nothing to worry about. And we'll do the same thing with the little skull and wings logo on the middle here. And be a little bit careful kind of how high up you go. Of course, you can always fix your mistakes, but it's easier to not make them in the first place. And same thing on this side. And actually, we didn't butcher it too badly. It still needs a little bit of cleanup, but, it's not bad. It's really not bad. We'll also get this little skull, if I can manage it, just right on the helmet. Oh, I butchered that. That's fine. I'll tell you what, we'll paint the entirety of the skull, and then we'll just worry about the cleanup. That might be a little bit of an easier way to do it. And actually, while we're here, if I have our silver, yes I do, I also want to do his little cybernetic hand thing, because otherwise I will forget about it entirely. And I don't really want to really jump into the other details on the other 4 guys just yet, because we're kind of going to run out of time for that. And I don't really want to, stop halfway through. So we're just going to focus on what we can do very quickly here as we kind of wrap up. Once again, as we kind of get to the end of our video, I do want to shout out our my Patreon. Feel free to check it out if you want to support me. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we're going to do just a nice layer of lead belcher just right onto his little cybernetic hand implant thing, augmentation, whatever you want to call it. And let's probably take us, 2 layers. I kind of thinned it a little bit much, but that's fine. And just all the way up to kind of that shoulder, I think is going to be perfect. And we'll do kind of a, well, maybe not. I was going to say we might do the plasma gun, but I think we're just going to do the kind of tip of it. I think the rest we're going to make kind of, red. I think that matches Dark Angels pretty well. I think with our Dreadnought, I did most of the gun red, so we'll kind of continue that. And we'll do the same thing with our plasma rifle there as well. Or, I don't think it's a Hell gun. I know these guys are called Hellblasters, but I don't think these are technically Hell guns. I think that's more like an upgraded las rifle, at least according to the latest inquisitorial book I'm reading. So we're gonna roll with that, and I'll have to let that dry, and we'll come back over it in the future. But it's kind of a good start for now, and so I think this is kind of where we're gonna leave it. As always, if you enjoyed it, feel free to do all the things we already talked about, like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode.